All right, so let's discuss a little bit what is going on with this Wisconsin DB going to Miami, the portal situation. So, let's kind of catch everybody up to speed on what is going on. Essentially, this Wisconsin player has asked to enter the transfer portal. By rule, they have to enter him within 48 hours. Wisconsin does not. He somehow ends up with Darren Heitner as his attorney. And it's wild how he is involved in every single college football scandal that exists. Anyway, basically the advice is go ahead and withdraw, and then we'll enroll you in Miami because there's not actually anything keeping you there. Kind of goes to court. Well, not kind of, it goes to court. And the ruling is essentially that is
Well, they
allowed.
sued. Yeah, I don't think it went anywhere in court. Like they just sued
Well,
for
it's
it.
in court because they sued, right?
Right. But like a ruling hasn't come down. But essentially, yeah, like he just unenrolled and enrolled in Miami.
And enrolled in Miami. And essentially what their argument is that there's nothing actually keeping you from having to enter the transfer portal before you go somewhere else. And Wisconsin is arguing that that's not true. But then Heitner is saying, well, if it's not true, then you and he has to follow these transfer portal rules. You, in fact, did not follow these transfer portal rules by allowing him into the transfer portal within 48 hours.
Which there's some truth to that. Wisconsin didn't. Now, Wisconsin's argument is that he signed an agreement that he signed an agreement that he can't get out of because you signed a contract, you signed a legally binding contract, and we're not going to put you in the portal after you signed this.
Right.
Again,
which
his argument,
kind of like, hey, you guys are big boys now playing with real money and real contracts. And this is you don't get to make up the rules as you go along, but I mean, maybe we do get to make up the rules as we go along.
It's so gray because, the other, Lucas's argument, again, Heitner's argument is, well, that contract was dependent on, the house settlement going through, and that hasn't happened yet. And so a guy can do that. I think that it's fairly obvious that he signed the agreement. He planned on being there. He was, Wisconsin and the Big Ten say that they have evidence of Miami tampering. I think everybody tampers at this point. You just try not to get caught. And we'll see if that evidence ever sees the light of day or not. But, kid got an offer from Miami. Their secondary was, worse than, their secondary was what kept them out of the playoffs this year. And so they need the help. And so he got a better offer. And
the house stuff doesn't actually take effect in April until April, right? If it goes into effect at all. And so I think, Heitner's and Xavier Lucas is the player, but I think that he and Heitner's argument is essentially you're making us follow rules that aren't actually in existence yet.
Which again, you still signed that contract with the expectation of what was happening, right? You still signed an agreement. So I don't know where the legal.
I think there's probably several wrongs in this situation, if that makes sense. Like I think, Heitner has put out some of the NIL contract formats that the Big Ten uses. And one of the lines in the standard contract essentially says that the school can change the payment amount at any point. The collective can change the agreed upon payment amount for any reason at any point. Well, that's an absurd line to have in a contract with players who think they're agreeing to a specific amount of money, right? But if you don't have an attorney look over this before you sign it, there's probably lots of players who just signed on the dotted line.
This likely happens at every school. This is not just a Wisconsin.
But this is just a kind of a template that Big Ten schools have been following. And that is absolutely to the benefit of the school and to the detriment of the player. So should these contracts be more even-handed? Probably. And that's why you as a player, if you're going to be in the business, right, need to have a seasoned attorney look over these things. But I also think there's a great chance he was tampered with. And I would personally love for Miami to get in trouble for tampering with players because that's 1,000% what happened in this situation. Now, does everybody do it? I mean, I think a lot of people do it for sure. Maybe I won't go out on a limb and say everybody does it, but a lot of places tamper, but you can't get caught. And
this idea, somebody responded to him on social media and said oh, well, I'm sure every school puts out contracts like this. And, sure. I'm sure they do. But by the same token, you can't, then you have to say the same thing with this, right? Well, if he was tampered with, does that break a rule? And he doesn't really have a great answer for that, right? Like if you're being tampered with, like was he actively engaging in negotiations?
Sure.
Which again, the proof will be in the pudding on that. The most interesting part of this to me is not that Miami would cheat, and it's not that a kid that is 20 years old, 19 years old would lie and ask out of not fulfill obligations of a contract. None of that surprises me at all. What surprises me is when Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports reached out to the NCAA, they said, yeah, there really is no portal. Like the portal is a fake thing. There's no rule that stops someone from unenrolling from a school and enrolling in another one. For the NCAA to admit that, that is absurd to me. Like that is legitimately craziness. Now, it makes sense. There is no rule that prevents, like that's how essentially transfers happened before we had this transfer portal, right? Like a kid went on, hey, I'm done at this school. Maybe I've graduated, maybe whatever. I'm out. I'm going to a new school. I'm going to transfer. But for them to admit that basically the portal doesn't matter, right? Like
it's essentially their way of keeping tampering from happening, right? Like they're saying, if you enter the portal, now you're no longer. It gives the kids a fail safe too, though, because you can enter the portal, and if the schools that you maybe don't have interest in, or that you have interest in, don't have interest in you, you have the ability to go right back without the unenrolling, re-enrolling process or any of that. It's kind of a protection for the athlete, honestly. Now you're
but some athletes don't need that protection. Let's be honest. Like Xavier Lucas graded out as a top 20 defense,
so
top
he
20
just
corner,
unenrolls and becomes
right, a free
agent.
agent. Who at that point, there are legitimately no rules for him. He can go on as many visits as he wants. He can talk to as many coaches as he wants. He can negotiate and buy it. Like he can do all this stuff. And again, on the tampering thing, yeah, I'd love if Miami got caught here. I don't really know that anything will come of it because the NCAA is pretty spineless anyway.
I mean, if they're going to sit there and say that our transfer portal, that by the way, we put the rules in place for, is actually fake. Like there is.
Right. We're talking about the coaches are voting on making it a 10-day window that happens in January. Who cares? I can enter the portal. I can enter the fake portal anytime I want.
We would be only restricted to each university's ability to enroll an athlete in classes mid-semester. Is that essentially the only thing that we are limited by, is how that university would incorporate that kid into school?
Yeah, I think so. And I know there's like the drop ad period and but aren't there always ways? Like, is there ever like if Jeremiah Smith wants to come to Florida in week 4 next year, you don't think they can find a way to get him in? Like, you don't think they could finagle some things, give him a hardship? I don't know. But like, I guarantee you that if Jeremiah Smith wants to go to Miami in week 4 next year, they're getting him in, right? Or Florida State or Florida or Texas or Georgia. Like that's happening. Yeah. Like there's no chance that you're not. Now, for an above average defensive back, probably not, right? But yeah, there is nothing stopping. And again, why wouldn't you just? I mean, shoot, you finish up the regular season and your team's done in December. Why are you not just transferring? Like, why didn't Notre Dame grab somebody right here before the national championship? Right now, I think they have more character. I get it, but like, there's nothing stopping that. Yeah, there's nothing stopping that at all. That's what I look forward to. That's what I look forward to seeing, because I think it's got to get worse before it gets better. And so next year in the playoffs, I'm never going to root for Miami to make it, but I almost hope Miami makes it so that they can pull somebody else off of somebody else's roster that's already out of the, didn't make the playoffs, and they can add them in January. Like that's what I need to see so that we can get some sanity back.
Go back to Pleasantville. Is that?
Whatever it takes. But yeah, to me, that's the craziest part, is that the NCAA said, yeah, kids can literally transfer at any point. Now, again, can they get into the program? Can they get into the school? That's what's binding. Okay, here's my take. The conferences need to put a stop to this.
Yeah.
The conferences need to say, you cannot transfer into our programs
except for these dates,
right? And you can get a waiver. You could apply to the Big Ten, but then it would take all 10 conferences and Notre Dame. It would take them working in unison. And if you're the ACC, are you going to turn down a Jeremiah Smith? Are you going to turn down, like, are you really going to do that? Like, are your morals that high? Right. And so, or the SEC or anybody, a Big 12, like, you're going to turn that down, him coming to your conference. So I don't know. But again, it is insane.
It's crazy.